Previous to that, tensions were beginning to grow in Northern Ireland between Catholic and Protestant communities, and these two were no exceptions. Now at that time this wall didn't exist. This place looked so different because their little streets would have run into one another's communities. They were lined with tiny little houses for working class people and so on. There was a little mixture of Catholic and Protestant on both sides. But as tensions began to grow, the minorities would have moved back into their own sides more. But those who didn't would have been put out of their homes or maybe burnt out of their homes. And that's the way it was. But on the 15th of August 1969 was the official starting time of the troubles in Northern Ireland, because these two communities clashed and a very serious riot developed that night. And on the other side of this wall there's a street that was virtually burnt to the ground by the Protestants on this side, and a 15-year-old boy was shot dead. Now that triggered the troubles, so the same thing began to happen all over. Minorities were getting burnt out of their homes and the occasional gunfire was taking place, and that's when the army had to be brought in to try and quell this trouble. When they came to this part, the army laid a barbed wire fence roughly where we would be now. They soon discovered that fence was never going to be enough to keep these people apart. So they began construction of the first section of this wall. It's 18 inches thick solid concrete, and it wasn't high enough because glass bombs, petrol bombs would have been being thrown over it both ways. So it was extended to what it is now. It's about 50 feet at its highest point. Now, this is the first wall to be built, and it's the largest wall to be built. And also, by the way, every building from where we are standing right back to the road that we turned off to get here was demolished. This was a complete no man's land for many years. This was the first wall, the largest wall. But in Belfast now we have something like 44 walls that all serve the same purpose as this. Some are quite small, maybe the width of this street, some a bit bigger, but they all serve the same purpose: keep Catholic Protestant communities apart. But what you got to remember, the majority of people in these communities are all over Northern Ireland. They're good people, they're ordinary, peaceful people. They didn't want any of the violence. It's the paramilitaries and those who supported them. Outside of communities like this is perfectly normal. I only live about 15 minutes from here, and where I live, Catholics and Protestants live together. There's no paramilitaries. Short distance away, you have this. And I was only a 15-year-old boy when this began, believe it or not. And that meant that a boy my age, in those days, would have been naive compared to a boy from this type of community. We weren't as tough in my place. But as time went on, people in these communities began to really suffer greatly. And then the paramilitaries, of course, they brought their bombs and things like that into the city centres and different places, and people were getting killed on a daily basis. And something had to be done about that. Now, 6 years ago, the government invited people from these communities to meet and discuss the removal of this. And after their long talks, they both agreed they weren't ready because they know they still have men of violence on each side. And they asked the government to leave it for another 20 years. There's still 14 years remaining on this wall before they discuss that again. If this one comes down, they'll all come down. I personally can't see it just as soon as that. But in 1969, the government, they thought it was time that a genuine effort had to be made for peace. And they put a proposal to the paramilitaries. They said that if you sign the peace agreement on Easter Good Friday 1969 and 1998, beg your pardon, sign the peace agreement and keep the peace for 2 years, then the government promised them that they would free every political prisoner by the year 2000. And that's what happened. So all these guys who were involved in whatever they did were set free. They were given an amnesty. They were out walking about. It wasn't successful right away. I think the first year there was 9 people died. That's a small number compared to, say, 1972, there was almost 500 died. But to those 9 families may as well have been 9 million people. But the big turning point in our peace process was 9/11. Whenever that happened, that put the paramilitaries in this country in a position where they could no longer do what they were doing indiscriminately, because world opinion would just say, you're no different than Al-Qaeda. And these guys know that. And that's why there's never been really anything serious against the general public, or any public buildings or private buildings, because hotels, cafes, department stores, everywhere got it. Car bombs on the streets and so on. That stopped. And we have what we have today. But what I will say is that the people who died in 9/11, they were the main contributors to the peace process here in Northern Ireland. Make no question about that. And you know what? It's sad that none of our politicians have ever came forward and let that be known to the people who lost loved ones that day, because they don't know that. And they have a right to know that. Our politicians have never had the decency to make that known in public. But maybe someday they will. And then you have people like yourselves who visit us. People who come here and you, without you realising it, you let people in communities like these especially see that there's normal people living a normal life. And they want a bit of what you have. Because there's some people, believe it or not, thought the way they were living was a normal way to live. And I'm being truthful about that. Especially young people in those days. Now the world's a different place. Kids have access to internet. Kids know now the difference. Now there's some families that still try and breed that hatred and bitterness into the young ones. That'll always be in Northern Ireland. But the majority, no. And that's why they're no longer queuing up to join the paramilitaries. The paramilitaries will probably always be in existence, but they're not active. And they're making the best of a bad thing, if you know what I mean, but the bad thing's not too bad, if I can put that way. There's still an undercurrent of hatred, but it's getting less and less. And it's thanks to people from all over who did make a contribution. And that's my short story concerning this wall. I hope that was interesting enough for you. I hope my Northern Ireland accent wasn't a problem. And thanks very much for your time. If you want to look about, take photographs. We'll give you markers if you want to sign the wall. That's entirely up to yourself. And thank you very much, folks. Okay?